On June 9th, the Collin County jury convicted Karmelo Anthony of murder and sentenced him to 35 years. Within the hour, police were making arrests outside the courthouse. What prosecutors proved, what 35 years actually means in Texas, and what happened on those courthouse steps once the verdict was read. This case was argued for a year by millions of people who were never in the room. The jury heard none of it. 21 witnesses, in order, under oath. The distance between those two arguments is why it ended the way it did. April 2nd, 2025, Frisco, Texas, a fast-growing suburb north of Dallas. A district track meet at David Kuykendall Stadium, delayed that morning by thunderstorms. Schools had pitched tents along the fence line, somewhere for athletes to sit out the weather between events. Centennial High School, where Karmelo Anthony ran, had not set up a tent of its own that day. His teammates had been sheltering under a baseball dugout until a coach moved them out of it. Anthony ended up beneath the Memorial High School tent, called over, testimony indicated by another student. By the account given at trial, they talked for about 5 minutes before anyone objected. Austin Metcalf was 17 years old. He and his twin brother Hunter both ran for Memorial. Hunter asked Anthony to leave the tent. Austin repeated it, and the exchange escalated from there. What happened next took seconds. There is no version of this case in which it took longer. Anthony left the stadium. Austin Metcalf collapsed. He was pronounced dead at 10:53 that morning. Officers detained Anthony within minutes, a short distance from the stadium. The probable cause affidavit records what he told them at the scene. "I was protecting myself." And then, according to that same document, "I'm not alleged. I did it." And in the patrol car, unprompted, the affidavit says he asked whether Metcalf was going to be okay. 14 months passed before jury selection began in Collin County. More than 3,000 summonses went out. Nearly 600 people were screened for a single trial. The defense raised a Batson challenge after prosecutors struck 3 black women from the panel. Judge John Roach denied it. The jury that was seated had no black members. The state called 21 witnesses. Its through line never changed. Anthony was asked to leave that tent, and asked again, and asked again. One witness put the number as high as 15. Others described his hands staying inside his backpack the entire time. One student testified. Anthony said, "Touch me and see what happens." Another recalled Metcalf answering that there was nothing in the bag. Then, by the state's account, Metcalf moved to push him out of the tent. Collin County's chief medical examiner, Dr. Elizabeth Ventura, testified to a single wound to the chest. Asked directly whether it was survivable, she gave the jury one word: no. Judge Roach admitted the autopsy photographs over defense objection, warning the gallery they could step out first. Austin's mother left the room. Jurors in the box were heard to gasp. Prosecutors put size in front of the jury too. Metcalf outweighed Anthony by 50 to 60 pounds, offered against any claim of reasonable fear. The defense did not dispute what Anthony did. It disputed who was entitled to do what. First, Attorney Michael Howard told jurors that Austin Metcalf had no legal right to use force to eject Anthony from that tent. Karmelo Anthony never took the stand. He did not speak in that courtroom at any stage of his trial. On the 9th of June, both sides made their final arguments to the jury. Prosecutor Bill Wersky told jurors the case came down to a single question of proportion. You don't get to meet a shove with a stab. That equals murder, plain and simple. The state called it a sneak attack. The defense called it a teenager who believed he was in danger. The judge's charge gave jurors a lesser option: manslaughter, a killing caused recklessly, without intent. Manslaughter in Texas carries 2 to 20 years. Murder begins at 5 and runs to life. The jury retired late that morning to decide which of those two things had happened. They were back in roughly 2 hours and 20 minutes. They rejected manslaughter. They found Karmelo Anthony guilty of murder. The verdict was read shortly after 1:30. The same 12 jurors stayed in their seats. Texas splits a trial in two: guilt first, then punishment, decided by the same people. The punishment phase opened that same afternoon. Both sides waived their opening statements. The state called no witnesses at all. It rested on what the jury had already heard. The defense called one witness, Anthony's mother, Kala Hayes. She asked the jury for mercy. She told jurors her son was very sorry for what he did. That was the only apology entered on the record. It came secondhand. Karmelo Anthony himself never spoke in that courtroom, at any stage. The defense made one last request. It asked the jury to find sudden passion, a mitigator, not a defense. It requires a killing driven by adequate cause, with no time for cool reflection. If found, it drops the range to 2 to 20 years. That was the same range the jury had already rejected hours earlier. Arriving by a different road, they rejected it again. The sentence came back at 35 years. Murder in Texas runs from 5 years to 99 or life. 35 sits well above the floor and well below the ceiling. It is the shape of a jury weighing two things at once: what was taken and the age and circumstances of the person who took it. The jury also made an affirmative deadly weapon finding. In Texas, that changes what 35 years means. No good conduct credit counts toward parole eligibility. Eligibility comes at half the sentence, or 30 years, whichever is less. Here, 17 and a half. Considered, not released. The parole board still has to say yes, and it frequently does not the first time it is asked. Inside, the sentence was entered into the record. Outside, on the plaza, the day was not finished. The Collin County courthouse in McKinney had been a gathering point since jury selection began in June. Supporters of both families, press cameras, and people with no connection to either who had come anyway. Minutes after the verdict was read, a confrontation broke out outside the building, and police moved in. At least 2 people were arrested. Among them was Sholdon Daniels, a Republican congressional nominee. Video was online within minutes and on national news within hours. By evening, more people had watched what happened outside the building than had followed what happened inside it. None of that was new. It had been the shape of this case since the 2nd of April, 2025. Within days of the killing, competing online fundraising campaigns were collecting money for both families. Each drew a large following, and an argument about race, self-defense, and who gets believed ran beside the case for 14 months. That argument was never part of the trial. 12 jurors decided this case in a room, on evidence given under oath. When the cameras were switched off, what the courtroom still held were 2 families sitting a few rows apart. Austin's twin brother, Hunter, read a victim impact statement to the court. He was the one who had asked Anthony to leave the tent first. Asked afterwards whether his family had ever received an apology. Austin's father, Jeff Metcalf, answered with one word: nothing. One family buried a 17-year-old in the spring of 25. The other will not see their son outside a prison for at least 17 years. The courthouse steps emptied within a day. If you follow American cases from the first charge to the